through Jesus Christ, O Lord. Amen.
You may be seated. This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. I wish to welcome all members and those in attendance a warm and pleasant good afternoon to this sitting of the House of Representatives for Thursday, March 19, 2026. Today we resume what has been a spirited and engaging budget debate. We will hear from the Most Honourable Prime Minister, who will make his contribution to the debate today. I am confident, members, that you will provide him with your keen attention and that, as always, the decorum of the House will be maintained. We are joined by a number of persons today, and I would like to extend a special welcome to the following persons. Honourable Tom Tavares Finson, the President of the Senate, and other members of the Senate joining us today. It would appear our entire team of senators from the government side is seated in the Parliament. Welcome. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, Cabinet Secretary, Honourable Audrey Sewell, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Rocky Mead, and Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Mrs. Arlene Williams. Also, we have some very special guests seated right to my left, I'll say, at the back of the members from the opposition bench. A special contingent of ministers from across the Caribbean. Let me first recognize Dr. Hanley, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Honourable Sonia Parag, Minister of Education. She's from the Cooperative Republic of Ghana. Also, Honourable Chad Blackman from Barbados. Honourable Octavia Alfred, who joins us from the Dominica Republic. and Honourable Sheila Rogers Webster, who joins us from Anguilla. Honourable Danny Butcher, who joins us from St. Lucia. Honourable Philip Jackson, who joins us from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And Mrs. Lorraine St. Louis Need, and Secretary, joins us from Grenada. I'll make special welcome and mention of Dr. Wayne Wesley, who is the CEO and Registrar for the Caribbean Examination Council, who is also with us today. I hope I have not left anyone out. Let me say to the special seated guest from St. Andrew, West Central, welcome on behalf of your Member of Parliament, the constituency of the Prime Minister, to all who are in the chamber and in the gallery today. I hope you will enjoy today's proceedings, and for all those who have joined us across the country on the various social media platforms, be it PBCJ Live or traditional media, I trust and hope that you'll find today's proceedings interesting and informative. Clerk, call of the roll.
Mr. Clark. Mr. Green.
Here.
Dr. Holness. Dr. Chang. Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bartlett. Ms. Grange. Dr. Tufton. Mr. Mackenzie. Mr. Montague. Mr. Darrell Voss. Mr. Chuck. Mr. Charles Jr. Mr. Morgan. Ambassador Marks. Mr. Samuda. Dr. Wheatley. Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn. Mr. Terry Long. Mr. Whittle. Mrs. Dalry Filbert. Miss Morrison. Miss Lee. Mr. Donovan Williams. Mr. Main. Miss Crawford. Mr. Delroy Williams. Miss Hamilton. Mr. Sivright. Mr. Azan. Mr. Brown. Dr. Brown Burke. Mr. Buchanan. Mr. Bunting. Miss Burchell. Dr. Campbell. Mr. Cousins. Mr. Crawford. Miss Daly. Miss Dr. Dawes. Mr. Golding. Mr. Gordon. Mr. Hales. Mr. Hines. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Jackson. Miss Jess. Miss Malahoo Fox. Mrs. Miller Bennett. Mr. Morris. Mrs. Nita Garvey. Mr. Newell. Mr. Paulwell. Mr. Phillips. Miss Perkis. Mr. Robertson. Mr. Robinson. Dr. Russell. Miss Shaw. Mr. Smith. Mr. Dwayne Vaz. Mr. Warmington. Mr. Brown. And Mr. Crawford. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, could we go through the agenda straight to public business?
Thank you, House Leader. Statement by ministers, announcements, bill brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, Motions relating to the sitting of the House, motions for leave to introduce bill, presentation of bills without leave of the House, first obtained, public business, House Leader.
Madam Speaker, let me join you in welcoming the Ministers of Education from our Caribbean family, also members of the Diplomatic Corps who have joined us, the Cabinet Secretary, and the various permanent secretaries and heads of agencies. Madam Speaker, today the budget debate will continue with the contribution from our Prime Minister, who successfully navigated us through COVID, successfully navigated us through Hurricane Beryl, and will successfully navigate us through Hurricane Melissa. Madam Speaker, I ask that the standing orders be suspended to allow the Prime Minister to complete his presentation without time restriction.
Thank you, House Leader. As we have done for all in this segment, the budget debate, the question is that the time limit be suspended so that it allows the Prime Minister to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Thank you. Prime Minister, the Honourable Andrew Holness.
Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Jamaicans at home, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Jamaicans at home and in the diaspora listening, watching and following on various media platforms, distinguished ladies and gentlemen in the gallery, Madam Speaker, honorable members, senators, and former members seated in the well. I also join in welcoming the ministers of education from across the region that are here. They are in Jamaica for the CXC conference, but I guess they wanted to see what all the excitement is about in the Jamaican Parliament. I welcome you not only as Prime Minister, but as a former Minister of Education. Madam Speaker, I stand before this Honourable House with a heart full of profound gratitude and a profound resolve. And I consider it a singular privilege to do this for the 11th time. As Prime Minister for a third consecutive term. I give thanks first and foremost to the Almighty God for His grace and mercy upon this nation through the passage of Hurricane Melissa, for sparing us the full measure of what that storm was capable of, and the strength He has placed in the hearts of our people. Farmers, parents, small business owners, first responders, who rose from the rubble with a dignity and a determination that humbled me. I thank Him equally for ordering my steps across 29 years of public service. As Member of Parliament for West Central St. Andrew, Minister of Education, Leader of Government Business, Prime Minister for a few months, still Prime Minister. Then the people's loyal leader of the opposition, and now Prime Minister once more. He has been my constant protection and compass. I thank the Jamaican people for the confidence they have reposed in me and my administration by re-electing us for a third term to form their government. I thank the many prayer warriors for their fervent intercessions, the well-thinking citizens for their private words of encouragement, and our party workers and activists for their vocal public support. I want to express my deepest appreciation to the international community that stood with Jamaica in our time of need. The heads of government and heads of state who called, who came, who committed resources, our multilateral development partners whose swift and decisive response produced the largest development financing package in Jamaica's history, and the many nations that sent personnel, supplies, and solidarity. Including members of the CARICOM family who are represented here by their respective ministers of education. To the men and women of the Jamaica Defence Force and the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Jamaica Fire Brigade, you walked in devastation on foot when that was the only option. Airlifted patients when roads had ceased to exist and distributed care packages to communities no one else could reach. You made every Jamaican proud, and this nation owes you a debt of gratitude. To every public servant who worked around the clock in the days and weeks following Melissa, you demonstrated public service at its finest. To the Jamaican private sector, the companies, associations, and entrepreneurs who mobilized resources, opened warehouses, contributed equipment, and served their communities without being asked, you show that Jamaica's resilience lives in the spirit of our people. To the entertainers and sportspersons, and to the countless individuals and organizations and members of the diaspora across the world who gave generously, Jamaica thanks you. Madam Speaker, I want to commend you for your disciplined and judicious ordering of the business of this honorable House. You well know the impact of public service on families. And I want to thank my family for bearing the weight of public life with me and supporting my endeavors. To the people of West Central St. Andrew, my extended family for 29 years, you continue to trust in me. And that is the reason why I keep serving. This year, there are some major projects which we will complete and on which work will commence. In a few weeks, we will complete and hand over 2 new multifamily housing solutions under the new social housing program to replace 2 dilapidated tenements. And we will begin construction of 3 additional multifamily housing solutions, including one in the community of Bell Rock to replace houses destroyed by fire in 2024. We will continue the development of the St. Paul's Lane community with the construction of a Golden Age home and sporting facilities. Construction will begin on parks and sporting facilities for the people of Frans Park and the Mall Road communities. Rehabilitation and repair works are slated to begin in a few weeks for the Olympic Court housing scheme under the National Housing Scheme Rehabilitation Program. Shortly, we will open the Olympic Gardens Performing Arts Center, and we will start the upgrade of the Kling Kling Oval. And I have good news for the people of Drewsland residing along the gully banks of the Sandy Gully. Repairs will begin on the collapsed sewer main and compromised retaining walls that pose a health and safety hazard to the residents. I'm certain the member from Western St. Andrew would also be pleased because it is a border area and we both share the challenge. Madam Speaker, these are but a few of the rolling stock of projects on the train line of delivery for the area. Every year, we are making significant investment in the communities. Crime is down, business activity is up, the Olympic Way hip strip is vibrant. There is still significant work to be done, Nevertheless, the constituency is progressing and every year is better than the year before. I want to acknowledge the newly elected councillor, Kelvin Hall, and members of the constituency executive, Miss Lynn, Miss Veronica, Miss Fine, Miss Sadie, Miss Annette, all the people, all the stalwarts, too numerous to name. Madam Speaker, I also want to acknowledge the hard-working ministers of my cabinet, the dedicated members on both sides of this honorable house who serve Jamaica with distinction every day. I want to thank my personal staff and advisors, my communications team at OPM, and the dedicated members of my security detail. Madam Speaker, I want to especially acknowledge and thank the dedicated teams at the ministries that I lead. You know, Madam Speaker, I want to thank our Cabinet Secretary, the Honourable Audrey Sewell, and the team of the Cabinet Office. It is not well known that the Cabinet Office is actually a ministry and the Cabinet Secretary is the permanent secretary. It is a ministry. I also want to acknowledge the support of Ministers Wheatley, Marks, and Fitzhenley, and our permanent secretary, Ambassador Rocky Mead, at the Office of the Prime Minister, another ministry of government. Madam Speaker, this administration has always been serious about security. We have recently delineated the Ministry of Defense with its own administrative standing, which is anchored by the permanent secretary in the OPM, Ambassador Rocky Mead, former Chief of Defense Staff. And we did this to yield greater cross-functionality with ODPEM. I want to commend Ministers Montague and Morgan and Permanent Secretary Arlene Williams, hardworking Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development. Madam Speaker, I stand here as Prime Minister, and most people would understand my job to be directing and coordinating all of government through cabinet ministers. However, I also want to point out that I stand here as a minister of government as well, with direct oversight of several substantial portfolio responsibilities. I don't only direct, convene, and preside, I also do the heavy lifting of ministerial work as well. Over 4 ministries. Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition only talks. I do the job of Prime Minister, and I head 4 other ministries. The leader of the opposition only talks. Yes. Times nonsense. Yes. And takes home $27 million. In the last term, the leader of the opposition earned more than the Prime Minister. Earned more than the Prime Minister. The opposition spokesman on finance stood in this house and said the opposition has no problem with the increase in MP salaries. A few days later, the PNP General Secretary put out a release saying They strongly object to the salary increase for cabinet ministers and members of parliament. Yet, Madam Speaker, none of them, with their self-righteous objection, declined to take their salary increase. None of them. In fact, Madam Speaker, they were the first ones calling the parliament to find out the amount of their retroactive pay. I'll share this with you, Madam Speaker. A member on that side not to be named. A member on that side not to be named, obviously concerned that the public posture of the PNP could force the government to reverse the pay increase, called to say that I should ignore the statement of the PNP General Secretary and the Leader of the Opposition, as all their MPs agreed with the increase and could not survive without it. You know yourself. Madam Speaker, when I took the decision to forego the pay increase, I said in a widely circulated press statement, this has broader implications for not only the current holder of the office of Prime Minister, but previous Prime Ministers or their surviving spouses and possibly future Prime Ministers. It therefore must be considered very carefully. My current decision to forego any salary increase could easily be changed by another Prime Minister in the future, or a new mandate may give an opportunity to reconsider the Prime Minister's salary. On September 3rd, 2025, Leader of the Opposition, the people of Jamaica weighed all these matters in the political scale and gave my administration a new mandate based on the work done to earn their confidence. Madam Speaker, I have a gift here. If the standing orders would allow, I want to give it to the Leader of the Opposition. If you don't want it, that's fine. But I thought it would have been so appropriate. I thought this would be a good. In fact, by the way, Madam Speaker, this is a cap that is one of our local designers. It's a very popular cap, and I thought that the Leader of the Opposition would do well to Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman on finance raised the issue of the rate of capital expenditure. He went on to suggest that the size of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development and its share of the national capital budget is a reason for slow utilization. Therefore, it should be deconstructed as a super ministry. The slow pace of utilization of the capital budget has nothing to do with the present configuration of the ministries. The cross-cutting issues of slow investment appraisal, permitting and approvals, procurement, and contracting, coupled with a lack of efficient, well-resourced enterprise-scale contractors, is the cause of the low conversion of the capital budget into economic value, leading to greater levels of growth. In other words, We are an overly bureaucratic country with supply side weaknesses which constrain our growth horizon. Despite these challenges, it must be noted that the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development, on average, has spent more than 97% of its capital allocation for the last 4 budgets. The opposition spokesman on finance would well be advised that in the 2022-2023 budget, the capital spend for the Ministry of Economic Growth and then job creation was 97.6%. In 2023-2024, it was 98.1%. In 2024-2025, it was 98.38%. And so far this year, haven't closed out as yet, we are at 95.59%. In fact, Madam Speaker, this ministry has stimulated, overseen, and supported the most sustained and robust period of infrastructure development since 1960, which in turn has resulted in the last decade being the most consistent and sustained period of quarterly growth in the last 30 years. I want to draw the attention of the House to the slide that is being displayed and to the viewing public. It's a very important slide. The economy under the Jamaica Labour Party returned 20 consecutive quarters of growth between the last quarter of 2015 and the COVID interruption. Before that, the longest quarterly stretch was 9 quarters. So there is a fundamental change in the Jamaican economy. The only time that we have not had growth would have been the COVID impact and the burial impact. The beauty of this graph that is being displayed, this table, is the speed at which the economy recovers. So, Madam Speaker, you know, there is something that we admit up front. This is not the growth rate that we would like to see. It's still very low. Nobody debates that. But, Madam Speaker, it is better than episodic growth. It is better than long periods of no growth. To get to growth, Madam Speaker, 2 things are necessary. They're not sufficient, but necessary. The first is to get the growth, Madam Speaker. The first is stability. And what you are seeing here as a feature of the Jamaican economy is stability. And the reason why we have this stability, it is because of the fiscal program that the government has implemented. You know, Madam Speaker, we go back and forth debating who is the father of fiscal discipline. We already said the DNA test proved that they are not the fathers of fiscal discipline. But, Madam Speaker, there is one more child of this government for which the paternity is not in question, and it is necessary for growth, and that is resilience. Madam Speaker, The author of Jamaica's resilient economic performance is this administration. The economy, as I said, Madam Speaker, gave us 20 consecutive quarters of growth between the last quarter of 2015 and the COVID interruption, and without doubt the best performance in employment generation in the history of independent Jamaica, with a most recent 3.3% unemployment rate. Again, Madam Speaker, no other government has been able to bring the unemployment to the levels that we have. We now have practically full employment, first time ever in the history of Jamaica. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, now Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development, is doing what it was set up to do. It is a well-performing ministry. Madam Speaker, the world order as we know it has changed. I know the present state of world affairs is troubling to most Jamaicans. Uncertainty, disruption, and seeming unfairness appears to characterize the new order. Our historic colonial experiences create an almost instinctive reflex that we will be victims in a world where raw power appears to be dismantling the protection of a rules-based system, where engagement is highly transactional and opportunistic. In the minds of the average Jamaican, they may not say it in this way, but if you were to distill the thoughts, the question is, how are we going to navigate this space as a small country and do more than just survive, but thrive? It is a real issue when we see happening almost regularly now, wars in distant places, weaponization of sanctions. It is a concern to the average Jamaican when the price of their goods rise, having nothing to do with them. As a small country, the sense of feeling powerless is real. But as Jamaicans, as Caribbean people, we don't just cower and say we are helpless. Our history tells us we must resist as a people. It is who we are, even in the face of power, unequal and uneven. We must resist. I think the first strategy, however, Madam Speaker, is that we must learn from our past. It is not the first time that the global order has changed in profound ways. We could go back to the Napoleonic era, but we won't go that far. Let's go to the post-World War II era, 1945 to 1950, when the actual multilateral system that exists now was formed. Born out of the ashes of global conflict, it is the most decisive and extensive ordering of global affairs in modern history. The United States of America and the Allied powers constructed a global order anchored on the formation of the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, and the General Agreement on Tariffs on Trade, GATT, which we now call the WTO. This multilateral order drastically reduced interstate conflict and enabled unprecedented economic growth over the last 8 years. It is not perfect, but it is better than anything that existed before. Madam Speaker, while multilateral rules-based institutions were being established, two other developments were happening in parallel. Many other developments were happening, but I want to focus on just two. The first is the emergence of what is called a bipolar power structure, which we generally call, at the time when it was emerging, the Cold War. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Between 1947 and 1991, the world split into two completing blocks, the US-led Western Bloc and the Soviet-led Eastern Bloc, each with its own military alliances, economic systems, and ideological frameworks. The second process, Madam Speaker, was the process of decolonization. And this was accelerating. Empires could no longer afford their colonies. Resistance against colonialism internally increased, moving dozens of states to independence across the world. Asia in the 1940s through to the 1950s, Africa in the 1950s through to the 1970s, and the Caribbean in the 1960s through to the 1980s. The United Nations started in 1945 with 51 countries. Today, it has 193 countries. Newly independent states joining this new rules-based multilateral system essentially created a third bloc. And you would hear these terms being used, I certainly heard it when I was growing up, referring to this third bloc as the third world. So the new system of global order, when it emerged with two blocks, the Western Bloc, the Eastern Bloc, divided by a Cold War, a process of decolonization which gave states independence, creating a third bloc. Madam Speaker, the multilateral system afforded newly independent nations like Jamaica a voice and a vote. That was very important in the multilateral system. A voice and a vote. But, Madam Speaker, we had no power. We had no military power. And we had no economic power. Madam Speaker, both superpowers sought to control this third bloc, to expand their spheres of influence, secure strategic geographies, access resources and markets, and spread their culture and ideology. Or simply put, to exercise hegemony. This was the context within which Jamaica started its navigation of a complex global system at its independence. At the outset, the Right Excellent Sir Alexander Bustamante, when asked about Jamaica's alignment, declared, "We are with the West." A simple yet profound framing of Jamaica's foreign policy, economic and social program, and political direction. The Jamaica Labour Party has always taken a pragmatic yet principled approach to the multilateral system and the vicissitudes of the poles of powers within it, while staunchly maintaining our independence of thought and agency to act in our best interest. The position served Jamaica well. The period between 1962 and 1972 saw political stability, the fastest pace of growth and development of the Jamaican economy, the build-out institutions. Madam Speaker, the period 1972 to 1980 of the Cold War era, the PNP government under Prime Minister Michael Manley changed Jamaica's political, economic, and social development policy and trajectory to democratic socialism, which also informed a change in Jamaica's foreign policy outlook. During that period, Jamaica joined the non-aligned movement and pursued relations with other socialist and communist countries of the Eastern Bloc, including Cuba. This was a fundamental and consequential shift based on an almost fanciful ideological aspiration. It placed us in the crossfire of a power struggle between superpowers which was not in our interest and had negative consequences domestically. This period coincided with the collapse of the Jamaican economy, our first debt crisis, the hollowing out of the middle class, and the emergence of widespread political and gang violence. Many of the challenges we face today are anchored in that period of our history. Now, look, what I have said here is going to stir up our antsness, because people do feel very strongly about this period, but I don't think it is ventilated enough. Look, no, what I've said here is not opinion. These are the facts. These are the facts. If you ask me for my opinion, I will give you my opinion. Right? And my opinion is that I admire Michael Manley's intellect. I admire his willingness to challenge, but I also question his judgment. Madam Speaker, as it turned out, by 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed as a pole of power, and the multilateral system entered a unipolar phase dominated by the US, Western liberal globalization, and free markets. The global socialist experiment for which the PNP diverted Jamaica had been defeated and proven to be the wrong path to be pursued. So here are the facts. Michael Manley, and this is part of why I admire him as well, would come back to power a reformed man in 1989, abandoning the policy of democratic socialism, embracing the IMF, liberalization, privatization, free markets, and pursuing closer ties with the United States. And this is what the part of the history that is not reconciled. Why did we go down that path?
In the first place.
You would not have gone down that path.
Only to go to the White House.
That is the question that keeps bothering me. Because it must bother every Jamaican, because had we not diverted for 10 years, even if we had changed government, but kept strategic and wise policies, Jamaica would be far better. Far better. As we have seen with countries like Singapore, facing the same challenges, but maintained a strategic and wise foreign policy.
Absolutely.
As a capitalist, 18 years as a capitalist.
Madam Speaker, today we see the global system changing again, moving from a unipolar world to now a multipolar world with the rise of China, India, the reassertion of Russia, and the EU. There are now more players who can exercise military, economic, technological, and normative power within the multilateral system than when it was designed 80 years ago. This means there is likely to be greater contestation within the multilateral system and less automatic consensus on issues and solutions. There is also a greater likelihood of fragmentation, which is what we are seeing now, as powers seek to advance their interests unilaterally. It begs for a reform, urgent reform actually, of the global multilateral system. We cannot abandon it, but it must be reformed to take into consideration these new power dynamics that have emerged. In this dynamic policy environment, Jamaica must be strategic. We cannot go down the road of ideological rhetoric. Been there, done that. Foreign policy is about having a clear framework of principles and values within which we pursue our interests, while treating with the interests and powers of others with whom we engage. My administration has always ensured that our foreign policy serves our economic interests. Whatever I do must make sure that Jamaica can recover quickly, that the person in Westmoreland whose house has not yet been restored, that the chances of a quick restoration is not hampered. And we see the benefits of our foreign policy efforts in the swift mobilization of relief and access to over $6 billion of reconstruction funds from the multilateral financial system. I don't want anybody to talk about foreign policy, because there's no other era in which Jamaica's foreign policy has delivered economic benefits for the people of Jamaica. A strong multilateral system is in Jamaica's interest, and we will always do our part to ensure it works. The essence of agency is that you act on your own will. As a responsible member of the global community, Jamaica will always take the necessary action to be compliant with all our obligations under the multilateral system. Nobody has to put sanction on us or force us, because we have agency. The country would have seen this in our actions when our actions caused us to be removed from the FATF and the AML-CTF grey list in 2024. Grey list, the way our trans system was, it was reviewed, we ended up on the grey list. Every member of the government worked very hard, including members of the opposition, to pass the necessary legislation, necessary policy changes. I mean, there were those saying that these, imperialists imposing global financial things on us, make we resist it. What, lose access to the international banking system? That's the logic of the argument. Yes, there are things we must resist when it comes to our values. There are things that define us as Jamaicans that we're not going to change on those. Man is a man, woman is a woman. We're not going to change on that. So we do. But we look at the things that are also in our economic interest. All right. So, Madam Speaker, similarly, when concerns were raised with the government of Jamaica by the United States regarding the Cuban medical mission more than a year ago, I want you to pay attention to that. More than a year ago, we reviewed the program against our laws and the various multilateral conventions under which we have obligations. And let me say from the outset that the Cuban medical mission has been beneficial to the people of Jamaica. The Cuban doctors and nurses have assimilated quite well in our hospital system and have developed strong bonds with the people they serve. I can say that Jamaicans love them and want them to stay. However, there were some aspects of the program which were brought to the attention of the Cuban counterparts, our Cuban counterparts, to include how personnel were paid, that run counter to our own laws and several international conventions. We were hopeful that adjustments could be made to the program to make it compliant and that we could have reached some agreement where we could continue to have the direct services of the Cuban health professionals who are here. We continue to be hopeful that some agreement, arrangement, some changes can be made to the program. We continue to be. However, Madam Speaker, I want it to be noted and always acknowledged in the debate that every year since I have been Prime Minister and before, in this House, we have debated motions on the embargo on Cuba. Yes, my administration did that. Carrying on the position of the PNP administration and the JLP administration before and the PNP administration before. So this notion about abandoning friends and look here, man, keep that in the 70s. We are in a different era now. At all my speeches to the UN General Assembly, there are a few lines in there about Cuba and the embargo. When I spoke at CARICOM, I spoke fairly and frankly. As our closest neighbor, we are concerned for the situation in Cuba. Through CARICOM, Jamaica will do its part to offer support for our brothers and sisters in Cuba. We take note of press reports that talks have opened between Cuba and the United States. This is a moment for reform and reset, and we are hopeful for a positive outcome. In all of what is being said and insinuated, there's one question that must be answered. What would the PNP have done?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You couldn't say that.
Well, we won't know. We won't know. Madam Speaker, there are moments in the life of a nation that test not only our systems, but our soul. Hurricane Melissa was one such moment. The slide that is about to be displayed shows the path Hurricane Melissa took across the island. Hurricanes are becoming more frequent and more intense. And I want the country, members of parliament, the guests here to internalize what I'm about to say. In the 65 years since 1960, the Atlantic has produced 799 recorded storms in the last 65 years. Remarkably, 201 of them, or a quarter, occurred in the last decade. Of the 34 Category 5 hurricanes recorded since 1960, 14, or roughly 38% of them, have occurred since 2015. If that is not showing you that the climate is changing. Meteorologists describe Melissa as the strongest tropical cyclone the Earth is physically capable of producing, a storm at the limits of nature's fury. When the winds finally settled and the rain relented, what greeted us in western parishes was not merely damage, it was devastation of a kind that defies description. Madam Speaker, I've seen photographs of Hiroshima, the haunting, flattened silence after the atomic bomb fell in August 1945. A city reduced in a single moment to ash. When I traveled through St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland in the days after Melissa, I understood viscerally what that kind of erasure looks like. And yet, Jamaica did not fall. We were tested at the very limits of nature's power, and we did not break. Our economy held, our institutions functioned, and our people adapted. In those same parishes, even as debris still lay heavy across the land, I met farmers already planning their next planting, mothers clearing the rubble with their bare hands so their children could have somewhere to sleep. I met small business owners who had lost everything but were ready to start again. In those moments, I felt something that no storm on earth can touch. The quiet, indestructible resolve of a people who have never, not once in our history, chosen to surrender. Madam Speaker, before anything else, we acknowledge with gratitude, humility, and reverence that God's hand was upon this island, and that we were spared the full measure of what Hurricane Melissa could have done. But alongside grace, Proverbs 22, verse 3 tells us that a prudent man foresees danger and takes precaution. Jamaica took precautions, not only in the hours before landfall, but in the years before the storm. Madam Speaker, when Melissa was still days away, shelters were activated, evacuation orders were issued, and emergency communications tested. The public was kept informed of the trajectory of the hurricane and precautionary measures to be taken through several public briefings and media announcements. We were as ready as this country has ever been for a hurricane. The investment this government has made in our security forces over the past decade, expanding personnel, equipment, and technology, growing our helicopter fleet, which turned out to be a very wise investment, strengthening our offshore patrol vessels, deepening our engineering and logistics capacity, paid dividends in those critical hours and days after Melissa struck. The seamless interface between national coordination and operational capacity was one of the defining institutional achievements of the Melissa response. It is a model we will build on, strengthen, and sustain. Madam Speaker, we would not be doing justice to the response if we did not also acknowledge what the experience exposed. Melissa stretched Our systems, logistics chains were strained, fuel and maintenance capacity came under pressure, maritime and air assets ordinarily deployed to border security and surveillance had to be diverted to humanitarian relief, creating windows of reduced coverage, which we cannot afford to ignore. These are not failures, they are lessons, and we are acting on them. In recognition of the strategic importance of disaster management to national security, the government transferred the disaster preparedness and emergency management portfolio to the Office of the Prime Minister. This was not a bureaucratic organization, it was a declaration of national priority, positioning disaster resilience at the apex of the government's strategic agenda and creating the structural proximity between ODPEM, the JDF, and the effective civil-military cooperation that is needed to adequately respond to a disaster of this nature. As we strengthen ODPEM, we are not seeking to contain within its walls every capability Jamaica needs to manage disasters. ODPEM's effectiveness going forward will rest on the quality of its coordination with the full ecosystem of national capability, drawing on the entities with experience in digital infrastructure, cybersecurity resilience, geospatial data mapping, and spatial analytics. Madam Speaker, I want to point out that in the weeks immediately following Hurricane Melissa, something extraordinary happened. A moment when countries would have faced downgrades, economic uncertainty, and capital flight. All three major international credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch, reaffirmed Jamaica's sovereign standing with stable outlook. And Moody's went even further. They upgraded us. Now, can you imagine? After a hurricane, the rating agency said, well, you know, even with the hurricane, you have done so well. I'm going to maintain your outlook. Yeah. I just want everyone to stop and reflect on that for a moment. It sent a powerful signal to the world that Jamaica's resilience, note the word now, not stability, Jamaica's resilience, which is what we have put into the economy, is not only social and emotional, meaning our people's ability to withstand disaster, but it is also institutional in agencies that we have created in terms of fiscal and economic. That credibility wasn't gifted to us, it was earned through years of disciplined, courageous reform and sound governance. And it has now become an asset we are deploying in the service of every Jamaican. And the results are already visible. The recovery from Hurricane Melissa is proceeding faster than anyone initially projected. But speed of recovery does not happen by accident. It is a product of fiscal strength deliberately built and strategically deployed. Consider what that means in practice. Within weeks, the government extended a loan of $150 million to the Jamaica Public Service Company to support the immediate restoration of electricity across the island. That single intervention accelerated the reconnection of communities, businesses, hospitals, and the resumption of daily rhythm of life that so many Jamaicans depend on. Today, electricity and water have been restored to approximately 99% of customers. Madam Speaker, let us be clear about what that made possible. A government that had maintained fiscal discipline, reduced its debt burden, built buffers and reserves, and earned the confidence of the international markets, wrote the check. The loan to JPS was the difference between the family sitting in the dark for 6 months and getting back electricity in 3 weeks. It's the difference between a farmer losing an entire season and getting back to work. It's the difference between despair and dignity. Our recovery has been unprecedented in its speed. Agricultural output has rebounded more quickly than anticipated. Inflation has come in below projections, enabling the Bank of Jamaica to reduce its policy interest rate to 5.5% in February 2026 and revise its projection for full economic recovery down to 3 to 2 years from the earlier 3 to 4 years that was projected. Madam Speaker, we have proven our resilience. Now is the time to claim another feature of an economy: resurgence. So you move from chaos to no growth, to stability, to resilience. And now, Madam Speaker, today, this budget is the first declaration that Jamaica will resurge. What is the difference between resilience and resurgence? Resilience is defensive. It is a capacity to absorb a blow and remain standing. Resurgence is forward-leaning. It is the decision to move with purpose, with ambition, with a vision of something greater than what existed before. We will not simply patch what is broken. We will build forward stronger, smarter, and more equitably than before. The suffering of our Western parishes will not be a footnote in our national story. It will be the catalyst for our next great chapter. For Jamaica, adversity has been a full stop. It has always, well, Madam Speaker, let me read that properly. For Jamaica, adversity has never been a full stop, has never been a full stop. It has always been just a comma, a brief pause before we rise again. We have endured, now we will build together. Madam Speaker, this government is leveraging our national resilience and international confidence in order to translate it into a platform for accelerated national development. Through close engagement with our multilateral partners, including the IMF, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, CAF, and the Caribbean Development Bank, Jamaica secured US $6.7 billion in terms of a financial package within weeks of the hurricane. This is the largest and fastest mobilization of development financing in Jamaica's history, and it was made possible not by the hurricane, but by everything Jamaica had built before it. Madam Speaker, the discipline of yesterday is funding the resurgence of tomorrow. But financing alone is not enough. We must, as a country, confront an uncomfortable reality. While Jamaica has built one of the most credible macroeconomic frameworks in the developing world, the execution of large investment projects too often moves at a pace that belongs in another era. Layers of approvals, fragmented processes, and rigid procurement rules, though designed with good intention, can make it difficult to move quickly when transformational opportunities arise. In today's global economy, capital is highly mobile, and investors compare jurisdictions not only on stability and incentives, but on speed of decision-making and certainty of execution. Too often, promising opportunities have gone elsewhere, to countries that are simply more nimble. We cannot allow this to continue. Even recently, Madam Speaker, I have seen projects that were eyeing Jamaica. Investors got frustrated and have gone elsewhere. We are advancing two powerful and complementary reforms. One focused on how we build infrastructure and the other on how we attract and accelerate transformational private investments. NARA will have special powers, that is the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, will have special powers to accelerate development approvals as well as procurement, enabling the execution of resilient infrastructure projects at a scale and speed this country has never seen before. NARA is not only about project delivery, it is about project networking to create new economies in areas impacted by the disaster and to introduce the greatest expansion of our economy in the shortest period of time in our history. Madam Speaker, NARA will turn a crisis into an opportunity for Jamaica. One of the most important lessons of Jamaica's economic reform journey was that execution requires not only institutional capacity, but credible, independent oversight. The Economic Program Oversight Committee, EPOC, became internationally recognized as a model of transparent, civil society-led accountability that gave Jamaicans and international partners confidence that the fiscal program was being implemented as agreed. We will use a similar model for NARA called JAMROC, that is Jamaica Reconstruction and Resilience Oversight Committee. And I'm pleased to announce that JAMROC will be chaired by Professor Peter Blair Henry, a son of Jamaica, who is currently a senior fellow at Stanford University's institution. He is a vice chair of the National Bureau of Economic Research. And I hear somebody say an academic, but listen to this part of it. A member of the boards of Citigroup and Nike, who has risen to the very pinnacle of international economics and public policy, and who brings back to this country a lifetime of intellectual and practical achievements and a personal commitment to Jamaica's development that has never wavered. The search for NARA's chief executive officer is also well advanced, following an open advertisement, both locally and internationally. 5 candidates have been shortlisted, and we are going through the interview and evaluation process. Madam Speaker, a complementary reform to NARA addresses the investment attraction problem. We will introduce a new framework called Fast Jamaica, the facilitated acceleration of strategic transformation. This will be part of our national growth inducement strategy through investment. Fast Jamaica will establish a dedicated pathway to fast-track strategic priority investment projects critical to Jamaica's economic transformation, particularly those with an investment value of US $150 million or more that can commence implementation within a year and could be integrated into the NARA network of projects. The framework will focus on projects in sectors that will shape Jamaica's competitiveness, and we're looking at areas such as energy infrastructure, digital infrastructure and telecommunications, logistics, air and seaports, water, sewage and desalination, low-income housing and urban development, high-value tourism including wellness, medical and sports tourism, entertainment and the creative industries, STEM education and research, specialized healthcare, high-value agriculture and agro-processing, advanced manufacturing, and critical minerals, including rare earth elements. Cabinet will retain the ability to designate additional sectors where strategic opportunities arise. Central to FAST Jamaica will be a strategic investment council, a high-level body tasked with the initial screening and evaluation of major investment proposals. The elements of this already exist between JAMPRO, DBJ, and the Cabinet Office. The Council will assess the strategic merit, economic impact, and national interest considerations of each proposed project and will recommend to Cabinet the most appropriate development modality, whether public-private partnership, joint venture, concession arrangements, or otherwise, as well as whether the project should proceed through direct negotiation or a competitive process. Projects approved by Cabinet will be designated strategic investment projects and will benefit from accelerated approvals across government, coordinated regulatory engagement, and dedicated facilitation teams to ensure efficient execution. FAST Jamaica will also allow the government, where appropriate, to engage with unsolicited proposals from investors, recognizing that some of the most transformative projects originate from private sector proprietary knowledge. Madam Speaker, FAST Jamaica is not about weakening safeguards. It is about modernizing how government partners with strategic investors in a fast-moving global economy. Fiscal exposure will continue to be rigorously addressed by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Cabinet will retain full oversight of all final agreements, but what will change is the speed, coordination, and clarity with which Jamaica engages with major investment opportunities. Together, these reforms represent a fundamental shift in Jamaica's execution architecture. They answer the question that has haunted this nation for too long. Why does so much promise take so long to become a reality? We have accomplished a lot, but we could have accomplished so much more. So, Madam Speaker, NARA is established. We will have the legislation. I will table the legislation today. We have interviewed 5 shortlisted persons to become the executive officer. We will make a determination shortly. We have selected someone to head the oversight body, and we will have conversations with members of civil society, the opposition, and other interest groups to fill out that body. So NARA is established. The purpose of NARA is to take all the projects that we have had in development, or some of them in File 13, and all the new projects, and coordinate their implementation. It will work directly with the projects that the government is leading. But that is not going to be enough. We need to crowd in the private sector, and that is why we have FAST working in complement with NARA. And a typical way in which this will work, Madam Speaker, when I go to show you all the projects that NARA will likely do, you will see that there are great opportunities for the private sector to come in. Every highway that we put in opens up lands for housing, low-income housing, for tourism, for agriculture, for manufacturing. Madam Speaker, NARA's first and most consequential mandate will be to prepare a comprehensive project and economic plan to deliver within the next 4 years. And when we say deliver, we mean complete within the next 4 years. Today, I lay out a transformative vision for Jamaica by highlighting several national projects across the length and breadth of the country. Many of these projects are not new. They have appeared in development plans, consultancy report, policy discussions for years, in some cases for decades. This vision was never the problem. What was missing was the mechanism to convert them from aspirations into reality. The financing, the institutional architecture, and the enabling environment. We now have all of these. Some of these projects will be delivered through NARA, others will be executed through existing institutions and public-private partnerships operating alongside and in concert with NARA. What unites them all is a single coherent national vision. A Jamaica rebuilt stronger, planned smarter, connected more efficiently, and distributed more equitably. Where every region of this island is a functioning engine of growth, and where the resurgence we are claiming is visible, tangible, and felt in the daily lives of every Jamaican. I will highlight a few of these projects starting in the southwest. Black River. Madam Speaker, I want to start in Black River because Black River tells a story that is larger than one town. It is the story of the existential vulnerability of low-lying coastal communities to the intensifying force of climate change. Black River is one of Jamaica's oldest and most storied towns. Founded in the 18th century, it was among the first places on this island to receive electricity, piped water, and the motor car, a proud maritime hub, the commercial heart of St. Elizabeth, gateway for the logwood and rum and pimento trade that shaped our economic history. The Georgian wooden houses along the waterfront, the masonry, mercantile buildings, the civic structures by the sea, all spoke to a town of character, history, and dignity. But Black River grew as many Caribbean coastal towns grew, parallel to the shoreline. Its hospital, its courthouse, its market, its homes, all concentrated along the coast, all exposed. For generations, that vulnerability was managed, tolerated, absorbed, but Hurricane Melissa ended that. Storm surges of 8 to 14 feet tore along the Crane Road corridor. The historic waterfront was devastated, civic buildings destroyed, critical infrastructure severely compromised. Madam Speaker, we will not rebuild Black River as it was. We will rebuild it as it should be. And in so doing, create something this town has never possessed in its 300 years of history, a real planned, consolidated urban core. The Urban Development Corporation, working with our development partners, is advancing a climate-resilient redevelopment plan that separates what belongs inland from what belongs on the coast. The heart of the plan is the new urban center to be developed inland, safely above storm surge and projected sea level rise. And you can see a representation of where that urban center is going to be and what it, well, that's the waterfront, but what it could look like. So this is where Black River's essential public functions, its hospital, courthouses, municipal offices, police station, tax office, schools, market, and transport hub will be consolidated into a planned, workable, flood-safe precinct for the first time. It will have a proper town square, a civic park. The buildings will be designed to withstand Category 5 wind loads. Built on elevated platforms above projected sea level rise scenarios with utility corridors, drainage infrastructure, and emergency redundancy. The historic waterfront will be protected by a layer of coastal defense systems, submerged offshore breakwaters to dissipate wave energy before it reaches shore, a concrete seawall integrated with a continuous public boardwalk, and engineered revetments along the most vulnerable stretches of coastline. The waterfront will become what it always had the potential to be, a vibrant public amenity and entertainment and tourism corridor a place where boutique hotels and restaurants and cultural experiences make this stretch of Jamaica South Coast a genuine destination. So the same questions that Melissa forced on Black River must now be confronted everywhere. And the answers must be guided by the same logic, applied consistently, deliberately, and at national scale. That logic can be distilled into 4 foundational principles that will guide how we plan, build, and invest going forward. The first principle is strategic spatial planning and risk-informed development. What happened in Black River happened because for decades, development decisions were made without regard to hazard mapping, flood risk, or climate projections. That must now change. Critical national infrastructure must progressively be relocated away from high-risk coastal zones. Hospitals, schools, utilities, highways, and logistic facilities must be positioned with full regard to storm surge, flooding, and sea level rise. Where we build is as important as what we build. The second principle is building redundancy in distributed systems across critical infrastructure. Black River Civic Core was concentrated in one exposed corridor. And when Melissa struck, a single surge compromised everything simultaneously. That is not resilience, that is fragility. Our transportation corridor, power systems, water supply, telecommunications, network, and logistic systems must be engineered with backup capacity and distributed architecture so that when one part of the system is struck, the rest keeps functioning. Resilience is incompatible with single points of failure. The third principle is the integration of regional development and resilient economic clusters. The Black River Plan does not end at the town's boundary. It connects to housing developments, agricultural corridors, tourism infrastructure, and the regional road network across the South Coast. That is intentional. Resilience cannot be built by project. It has to be built by a network. Connectivity, roads, hospitals, schools, housing, energy systems, and government services must be planned together to create a self-sustaining regional ecosystem. The fourth principle is economic diversification and production resilience. A resilient nation is not only physically strong, it is economically adaptable. Black River's rebuilt waterfront will anchor not just tourism, but wellness, marine recreation, heritage experience, and culinary offerings rooted in St. Elizabeth's agricultural identity. That diversification away from dependence on a single sector, any single market, any single source of economic activity is the model for Jamaica as a whole. We must broaden our productive base. Madam Speaker, the redevelopment of Black River will embody all 4 principles. It will be proof of concept that Jamaica has learned lessons and that we are determined to apply them not just to the historic town of the South Coast, that is the Black River, but to every parish, every corridor, and every community of this island that faces the same challenge as we seek to build forward stronger. Now, Madam Speaker, I know the people of Black River are anxious. Your MP, I mean, I could only describe it as anxiety. He is also anxious. Particularly persons who own property in proximity to the coast that sustained damage. There's a certain level of uncertainty. They're not sure whether or not they should rebuild, restart. Many of them have reached out to say, Prime Minister, I don't want to restart. In fact, there are several who have said, you know, I was even contemplating coming out of business. Melissa's hastened the decision, but they want some indication so that they can figure out how to plan. And we hear on our side the magnitude and scale of what we are planning to do can't be rushed. We can't make wrong decisions. So we have to think these things out carefully, put in place the systems and the structure. So today I would have laid out for you the NARA, which will manage it, the legal framework under which it is going to be managed. So we are well there. So I would say to the people of Black River, we have identified suitable lands to support a structured program of relocation and reconstruction for housing and business. For businesses, the town of Black River, for businesses in the town of Black River, the UDC has been asked to begin dialogue with property owners regarding acquisition of property and location where necessary. Madam Speaker, I don't want to say too much here because I know how, what leaves here and lands there might be two different things. So I prefer that the entity, I have tasked them to go and start the dialogue, that they go and speak to the people directly. After agreement is reached, then you can speak publicly. Early next month, various agencies of the government will begin the consultations and sensitization with specific communities in Black River and along that corridor regarding relocation of our communities. The truth is there are just some communities that proximity to the swamp, threat from the sea, when we look at all of the risk maps that the best option is to relocate. But we know how difficult this is. And so we will handle this in a very sensitive way. We will ensure in a very transparent way as well. We will ensure that nobody is at a loss and that livelihoods are enhanced as a result of it. It is not something that is going to happen overnight. We acknowledge this, but it is something that we must do. So we will start the conversations individually with them. Madam Speaker, as you can see, there are several exciting transformational projects planned for the Southwestern region, including Fonthill. Yes, with its world-class ecotourism potential, Fonthill is down for development. The airport in Little London, which was already announced, that will be brought on to the NARA project sheet. And the new urban center in Negril, that as well will be brought on to the NARA sheet. And I wanted to just draw your attention to the road network. There, the lines in red are showing you new highways and corridors that will be built. One of them will be the extension of the east-west highway from the William P. leg bypassing Spur Tree. And then there is another corridor which will not run on the coast, but more inland, but will connect to where the new Black River Urban Center will be. So all of these roads will be under NARA, and they will be started and completed within the next 4 years. In fact, these roads should be completed within the next 3 years. What we learned from the hurricane is that in the immediate few days, we did not have access. The roads were impassable, they were blocked. And, one of the problems was just how the road was built. We had no challenges with the highways. No highway was blocked because these roads were built to different standards, different drainage provisions were made. Now, St. Elizabeth, which didn't have it before, will now have 2 modern highways traversing the parish. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the northwest end of the island. Relax, the man. No, but the member, just to put the member at ease. What I'm presenting here are, large scale reconstruction projects. So for Westmoreland, you would have heard what we're going to do with Negril and so forth. But for the other areas, it is mostly housing reconstruction. So I will address that. I will address that under a different modality. So, Madam Speaker, anyone who has driven from Montego Bay to Negril knows the bottlenecks at Hopewell and Lucy. This is not just a quality of life frustration, it is an economic cost. Every hour of unnecessary journey time is a deterrent to tourism investment, a disincentive to the visitor's experience, and a brake on the development of Hanover's enormous untapped potential. Madam Speaker, Hanover has so much potential, but it is, almost like an interland in Jamaica. And in the same way that we have opened up St. Thomas, we will open up Hanover for development. The government will advance the Hopewell and Lucy bypass, running through a connection point on the Long Hill bypass, which is already under construction. In St. James, traversing westward with Link Road serving both Hopewell and Lucy before terminating on the westward side of Lucy. The alignment will run approximately 3 kilometers south of the existing coastal road. This will unlock the entire waterfront stretch between Montego Bay and Negril as prime resort lands. In addition to the bypass, we intend to develop the Lucy Harbour into a premium boating destination. Sheltered from the prevailing winds, with deep natural water and proximity to emerging resorts on that belt between Montego Bay and Negril, Lucy Harbour has every natural attribute required to become a premium boating destination. So under NAR, this is something that we will do to create the economic incentive, but this is a perfect project for private sector. Yes. And so NARA will stimulate, facilitate, coordinate, but more than that, get it done quickly. The town of Lucy itself is similarly at risk for storm and wave action. In other words, it faces the same threats as Black River. In fact, probably worse, because Lucy is actually below sea level. So I wish to indicate here that consideration is being given to the eventual construction of a new town center for Lucy when the bypass that we have spoken about is complete. So we won't do it in this round. We can't take on too much, but let's do the bypass first, and then we do the new urban center. Madam Speaker, I want to talk about St. James, Montego Bay in particular. Recently, I was written to by one of the tourism interests in Montego Bay, expressing real concern about the state of the town, how it looks, the collection of garbage, the public facilities that are there, and there's a real concern raised, and I want the tourism community to know that the government hears your cry. We're not just sensitive, we are working to have it addressed. One of the big issues, which I know is a challenge, is the collection of municipal waste, the collection of garbage. And I'm sure Minister Mackenzie will address this at some point. But you recall when we said we have over 500,000 truckloads of debris to move. We have made a dent on it, but it has been at the expense of the diversion of the limited stock of equipment that we have from the municipal operation into the debris management operations. I think very shortly we will have to bring the debris management to either a pause or an end so that we can refocus on the municipal issues. So I want to indicate to the people of St. James, yes, we hear you, and we are going to address this problem in short order. Madam Speaker, Montego Bay is our tourism capital, and it is time we undertook new investments to revitalize and secure its position as the leading destination in the Caribbean. Hurricane Melissa inflicted severe damage across Montego Bay, particularly in the coastal communities of Catherine Hall and West Green and Freeport. The destruction was painful, but it has given us something valuable, a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine this corridor in a way that is bolder and more resilient. But we must first protect the city, which is a key pillar of Jamaica's economy. Montego Bay has long been vulnerable to flooding. Its rivers, when overwhelmed, have repeatedly brought misery to communities. The government will therefore undertake significant investments in river training to contain, manage, and direct floodwaters away from communities and commercial areas and critical infrastructure. The people of West Green and Catherine Hall will be very happy to hear this. And downtown Montego Bay, yes. Madam Speaker, the Montego Bay Freeport, its surrounding areas represent one of the most strategically valuable and scenically spectacular stretches of real estate in the entire Caribbean. It is home to our mixed-use cargo and cruise ship port and the Montego Bay Free Zone, and is flanked by major hotels, premium residential developments, and a forthcoming 28-story mixed-use hotel and residential complex, a powerful signal of the confidence that investors already place in this corridor. At the same time, the soon-to-be completed Montego Bay Perimeter Road is fundamentally reshaping the economic geography of the wider region, opening new corridors and unlocking additional lands for investment that were previously out of reach. Our plan is to gradually relocate the BPO and light industrial activities in the free zone to new purpose-built facilities along the Montego Bay Perimeter Road, catalyzing vibrant economic activity along the emerging corridor while providing modern, world-class, purpose-designed spaces. The thinking and the beauty of this strategy is that this will free up prime waterfront lands on the Freeport Peninsula for their highest and best use. We envision a landmark mixed-use development, commercial, retail, and premium residential seamlessly woven into the urban fabric of the city. Absolutely. Comparable in ambition and elegance to the celebrated Brickell waterfront in Miami. And at the heart of this vision will be a performing arts theater. It always is a puzzle to me. Every hotel has to have their own entertainment package. You know, we could invest in developing real premium entertainment if we had a proper performing arts center. You know, we could even invite Broadway to come and have plays there that the tourists could, instead of having to be stuck in the all-inclusives, they have somewhere to go. Locals can have somewhere to go. So the thinking, and you know, one thing with this government, we apply strategic thinking to everything. Everything. So, you know, when the Freeport was developed along the the coast, very important that it was actually coastal, so that because it's close to the port as well, because the idea was like manufacturing, you get on a ship and you go. But things have kind of changed a little bit, because most of what the work that the free zone is doing has nothing to do with shipping. We ship it via email. In other words, the Freeport is now doing digital services, BPOs. They don't need to occupy valuable premium port land. So where they need to be is actually beside efficient public transportation. Absolutely. So people can get to work easily. Right now it's chaos to get into the Freeport. Yeah. So just this move is going to increase the efficiency of the town, but increase the value and productivity. And redirect traffic from outside of the town to allow Montego Bay to be able to breathe. Madam Speaker, the vision does not stop at Freeport. What we are proposing is the transformation of the entire coastal corridor, from the Freeport sweeping eastward to Harmony Beach Park, along the waterfront, and all the way to the iconic Hip Strip. This breathtaking stretch of Caribbean coastline will be unified into one seamless, world-class leisure, entertainment, and shopping corridor. The top road. Minister, what's the proper name of the top road? The Queen's Drive.
Top road is like.
The president of Montego Bay. Top road, as we all know it. Very, very few people know it as Queen's Drive. The top road will be dualized, and it's a very important point. The top road will be dualized to handle traffic efficiently, while the bottom road will be progressively pedestrianized as well as the Hip Strip itself. The result will be a walkable waterfront of rarity and vitality, connecting the cruise ship port to all the way to Harmony Beach Park and Doctor's Cave Beach, and every restaurant, bar, gallery, and shop along the Hip Strip. It's always a disappointment, you know. We have a all-inclusive culture. We call it the all-inclusive. But really, if you think about it, it's really all exclusive. Right? If it were truly all inclusive, you would come to your hotel and you would be able to walk outside, go on the trip, go to the market, sit down in a restaurant. You would be able to move around the city. And that's what we when we talk about transforming tourism, that's what we really have to do. Right? We have to do that. So we're going to use the opportunity of Hurricane Melissa to just deal with these matters once and for all. Nara will deal with them once and for all. Madam Speaker, we are also examining ways to enhance the elegant corridor between Sangster International Airport and the Montego Bay Convention Center. You know, it's called the elegant corridor. I must tell you, it still has some elegance to it, but it needs a refresh. Yes, it needs a refresh. So we're going to be examining ways to do that. One of the big challenges with the elegant corridor, the Minister of Tourism will tell you, and I'm saying this for the hearing of those persons who operate hotels along the corridor, is the noise pollution. You see, Madam Speaker, when the North Coast Highway was being developed, that section was technically supposed to be a boulevard. Right? So, you know, in designing cities and towns, you know, streets lead onto boulevards. So streets empty traffic onto boulevards, and boulevards carry them onto highways. But what has happened is that this road is neither a boulevard or street, or it's playing all these roles. and it is carrying heavy traffic like a highway, but people have to exit to go into the hotels or go into the business places. Worst of all, and what really sometimes I'm very distressed when I see it, the hop, skip, and jump of workers trying to move across the road to get to the hotel. It doesn't make sense. So that entire elegant corridor has to be redefined and re-engineered to deal with soundproofing by building natural sound barriers, grade separation and tunneling so that you can move across, and building, because there is enough space in several areas to also build a kind of local road that connects all the hotels. Then you go under or over and you're onto golf course or wherever, to really make the tourism product more seamless and of greater value, greater.
Yeah.
Madam Speaker, Black River, Madam Speaker, like Black River, Falmouth is a case study in the existential vulnerability of low-lying coastal communities to the intensifying impacts of climate change. The flooding of the town, the failure of its drainage infrastructure, and the severing of its road connections during Hurricane Melissa were not random misfortunes. They were the predictable consequences of a town whose layout, institutions, and infrastructure were simply never designed for the climate realities we face today. We cannot simply rebuild what was there. We must fundamentally reorganize Falmouth.
Yeah.
I see, Madam Speaker, big smile on the Member of Parliament for North Trelawney, who, unlike most MPs, she actually lives in her constituency and lived in the town of Falmouth. All right, member from Southwest St. Catherine. The drag line, who else lives in their constituency? Good. Good, Rose, good. The drag line,
I know where you live.
the drag line, which is the critical drainage canal running east to west through the town, provides a natural organizing boundary. It is both the town's most important piece of infrastructure, and as Melissa demonstrated, it is the most neglected. Major infrastructure works will be undertaken to clean it and progressively modernize it into a functional water feature that both protects the town and enhances the remarkable Georgian character. Again, this will be a project on and off. But more than that, the drag line will serve as a boundary between two distinct and complementary zones of reimagined Falmouth. North of the drag line, closer to the sea, the focus will be on what the waterfront does best: tourism, heritage, recreation, and coastal protection. The magnificent Georgian historic core, the Albert George Market, the Falmouth Courthouse, the Tharp House Complex, the churches, and the Baptist Manse will all be preserved as far as possible. The cruise port and the waterfront will be enhanced and activated as world-class visitor experience. South of the drag line, we will build the resilient civic backbone that Falmouth has never had. The hospital will be relocated inland. It's a very important point, members. Madam Member of Parliament, we will be relocating the Falmouth Hospital inland. We have identified somewhere. We'll make that known as soon as we have finalized the land. And this will be away from the flood zone with direct access to the North Coast Highway so that it remains fully operational precisely when it is needed most. Madam Speaker, during the pandemic, I flew to the hospital again. I want to commend all the hospital workers, but I wanted to commend the Falmouth workers in particular as I visited them. Very difficult circumstances, but like everywhere else, they were there doing their service. A new urban center will be built to modern standards of climate resilience and will consolidate critical public services and give people of Trelawney the standard of public facilities they deserve. Further south, and I want Minister Grange to pay attention to this one. Further south, anchored by the Trelawney Multipurpose Stadium at Florence Hall, we will finally deliver on the promise this facility has always held. We will be developing the area into a world-class sports center for sports training, major events, and sports tourism. While building around it vibrant housing and a commercial nucleus that brings permanent economic life to this corridor. Madam Speaker, we have had several proposals to use the Trelawney Stadium, but the government was never fully in a position because, Madam Speaker, to convert this into a sports tourism entity would require not just the facility. We would have to put in place infrastructure, water, proximity to working and resilient health facilities, proper housing, all the things that would be required to make such a facility work. So we were never in a position then to do it. But today, Madam Speaker, we are bringing all the infrastructure. We're bringing all the infrastructure together. So this can actually now become a center of economic activity in sports. The Minister of Tourism sent me a note to say that I forgot to mention the upgrade of the Montego Bay Convention Center. Yes, under these projects, the Montego Bay Convention Center will be upgraded in addition to the re-engineering of the elegant corridor. Madam Speaker, I now move to the northeastern section of the island. Madam Speaker, the North Coast Corridor and the Draxall and Miami Bay stretch in particular has become one of the most rapidly developing commercial zones in Jamaica. New businesses, new housing developments, new hospitality enterprises, and new entrepreneurial energy have concentrated in this corridor with remarkable momentum. The government wants to support and deepen that energy, not for it to be strangled by the congestion, but for it to be able to properly carry the traffic load of the area. On major event weekends, traffic snarl from miles from St. Anne into neighboring Trelawney. The North Coast Highway capacity has been exceeded by the very growth it helped generate. And attempting to upgrade a heavily used roadway while traffic is still flowing through it, as we learned from the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, causes disruption and dislocation that simply cannot be absorbed by communities and businesses that depend on the corridor for their livelihoods. The solution is to build the alternative first. Detailed feasibility studies are being completed for the North-South Highway Extension Project. The proposed extension consists of two segments branching from a new grade separated interchange near Miami Bay, westward to Discovery Bay in St. Anne, and eastward to Tower Isle in St. Mary. Together, these extensions will create a high-speed tolled alternative to the existing North Coast Road, diverting through traffic away from the congested commercial corridor reducing journey times dramatically and unlocking the tourism and investment potential of the wider North Coast and St. Mary to the western parishes. Once the North-South Highway extension is sufficiently advanced, the North Coast Highway Improvement Project will follow, upgrading the existing alignment from Montego Bay to Dragal, including the dualization of key sections where traffic volumes and safety demands require it. The Draxall corridor is not a problem to be managed. It is a success story to be expanded. With this investment, we give it the infrastructure it deserves, and we unlock the next chapter of growth along Jamaica's most visited coastline. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the eastern end of the island, Port Antonio. Port Antonio is unlike anywhere else in Jamaica. It is the birthplace of Caribbean tourism, the town that first showed the world what Jamaica could be, drawing Hollywood legends, royalty, and the world's most discerning travelers to its twin harbors and extraordinary natural setting. It deserves a future worthy of that legacy. As I have reported to this Honourable House on previous occasions, the Port Authority of Jamaica, working with international consultants, town residents, elected officials, and government agencies, developed a master plan for Port Antonio built around a clear and compelling vision. A high-value, low-density tourism destination that preserves the unique history and character of this irreplaceable town while unlocking its enormous unrealized potential. We are now moving from planning to delivery, starting with the Port Antonio bypass. Madam Speaker, sometimes, I'm doing this now 11 times and going through all the projects and the plans. I can just imagine that the people listening might say, but you said this already, or here goes another plan. But the beautiful thing is that having seen these plans from conception to inception, it is just an amazing feeling. So I recall when we were doing the discussion about how are we going to develop this beautiful asset of Port Antonio. And we recall that when the sewer lines were being put in, I believe by the position at the time was government, the chaos it created in the town.
We got the money.
Well, yes, we got the money, but they implemented. Right. So, but it was chaos in the town, just to put in the sewer lines. And so the thought was, if we can't do any further development in the town, because the development itself may kill the town. So what we have to do first is to do the bypass. We have to create an alternative so that traffic can flow whilst we do, because of the significant development. We are done the project, and Madam Speaker, and I'm now pleased to say that the project man is man, woman is woman. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that this project has started. This is an $81 million project, and it is an essential precondition for everything else the master plan will seek to achieve. This 18-kilometer corridor will be delivered in two phases. The first spanning Norwich to Turtle Crawl Harbour, and then 7 kilometers of 4-lane roadway, new bridges and upgraded drainage, built inland and elevated to protect against storm surges and coastal erosion. By diverting through traffic away from the historic town centre, the bypass will give Port Antonio the space it needs to become the premium destination the master plan envisions. Beyond relieving congestion, the bypass will open new corridors for housing, commerce, and economic activity. And as I've said, works has already begun. The broader master plan will deliver 4 transformational elements: a new cruise terminal in the East Harbour, paired with high-end hotels and villas on the Folly Lands, which will establish Port Antonio as a premium cruise destination unlike any other in the region, intimate, authentic, and famed by some of the most spectacular scenery in the Caribbean. The cricket grounds will be enhanced into a modern multi-purpose sports and entertainment amphitheatre, activating this underutilized asset and bringing major events to Portland for the first time. A new pedestrian promenade along the shoreline will connect the east and west harbors, transforming the waterfront into a continuous walkable space for residents and visitors alike. And a new public park will give the people of Portland a world-class recreational amenity on their doorsteps. Madam Speaker, just to be clear, these pictures that you are seeing are not just, promotional rendering. Actual architectural design work has gone into this. All right. Complementing all of this, Madam Speaker, is the Boundbrook Urban Center. So you hear me talk about we're going to build a urban center. We are building urban centers. The Boundbrook Urban Center is approximately 40% complete. Like the Morant Bay Urban Center, Boundbrook will be an integrated commercial hub combining public and private services seamlessly in one location. Madam Speaker, the development, the new port, and I want this is the Morant Bay Urban Center. Well, the bypass starts there. So it connects there. So, Madam Speaker, the development of a new port in St. Thomas has been discussed for some time. The original intent was to develop an aggregate port to serve the growing demand for construction materials in regional markets such as Guyana and Suriname. However, Hurricane Melissa fundamentally expanded our thinking. Hurricane Melissa served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of Jamaica's southern coastal line and the existential threat that a direct strike on Kingston would pose to the port of Kingston, and by extension to the nation's ability to recover from any such disaster. As a result, the government will now not only develop an aggregate port for export, but one with capacity for mixed usage, such as the Reynolds Pier in St. Anne. This port will serve as a critical backup to the port of Kingston in the event of a major disaster, while simultaneously driving economic growth and creating much needed employment opportunities for the people of St. Thomas. Subject to more detailed feasibility studies, the Port Authority has identified a site near Yala, St. Thomas, that benefits from adequate coastal depth and vessel berthing, proximity to established quarry operations, and road access via the newly completed highway. Madam Speaker, the Port of Kingston is now one of the fastest growing ports in the entire hemisphere, and we are determined to ensure that our infrastructure keeps pace with that growth. We are undertaking a series of transformational projects that together will create the largest concentration of near-port logistic lands anywhere in the Caribbean. The first of these is the $80 million Westland project, already underway, which will add 15 acres to the Kingston Freeport Terminal, increasing cargo storage capacity by more than 25%. The second involves the realignment of Marcus Garvey Drive to the northeast of Tinson-Pen and the incorporation of the Tinson-Pen lands into an expanded near-port corridor. No, it's our constituency. A portion of these lands is already being actively utilized for automobile logistics. a clear signal of Kingston's emergence as a regional hub in a dynamic sector, and a preview of the far greater potential that lies ahead. Madam Speaker, inadequate drainage infrastructure along this corridor has resulted in disruption of operations from even moderate rainfall. The National Works Agency, in collaboration with local and international consultants, has completed comprehensive studies for a drainage system designed to efficiently convey stormwater to Hunts Bay. We will move decisively under NARA to finalize the designs and implement this solution. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, we can't expand the port without doing this drainage project. Madam Speaker, speaking of drainage, the Kingston metropolitan area is urgently in need of serious work on its most critical drainage infrastructure. That is the Sandy Gully, which is the city's main defense against flooding. This was built some, 70 years ago? Almost 60 years ago? More than 60 years ago. So, and it really has not had a major overall. And just to explain to the country how that drain works and why we need the drain. If there is a weather system that is coming off the Kingston Harbour and it is going across Kingston, it is going to meet the hills of St. Andrew. And what that will do as the precipitation moves against the hills is that all of that will fall as rain. It will come down the hill, and if it doesn't get into the Sandy Gully and go into the sea, it will flood the Kingston Plain. And so that's why it was built like that. So it actually takes the water coming off the hills for any heavy precipitation. But the gully as it is, because the inverts and the other infrastructure that support it, they are aged. And so they are falling apart. So under NARA, yes, thankfully, the gully was not damaged. The Sandy Gully was not damaged by Melissa. But because we have a resilience mandate, we know that this is a key piece of infrastructure that is needed for Jamaica's resilience, and therefore the reconstruction of the Sandy Gully will be a major project on the NARA. Anchoring the entire logistics ecosystem is the Caymanas Special Economic Zone, Jamaica's flagship logistics project. The Caymanas Special Economic Zone is designed to complete Jamaica's transition from a transshipment hub to a fully fledged logistics center for the region and beyond. The first phase will be developed over 4 years at a cost of $8 billion, covering 200 acres of the 700-acre property, generating hundreds of direct and indirect jobs during construction alone. Taken together, the Westland, Tinson Pen, and the Caymanas Special Economic Zone project, which has started. These three investments will assemble the largest block of near-port logistic lands in the region, placing Jamaica firmly on the pathway for fulfilling our national ambition of becoming the fourth global node in logistics alongside Singapore, Dubai, and Rotterdam. Madam Speaker, these are the exact words that were said by the former Minister of Industry and Commerce, who is now the Member of Parliament for Western St. Andrew, which shows that, and he knows, I've always, where credit is due, give credit. You don't have to originate all the ideas, right? The brain is not all in one head. And how I see myself, yes, I like to think myself as a great thinker and conceptualizer, but I prefer to be thought of as the great builder, the one who does it.
Building. You want cash that quick.
Madam Speaker,
Real building is.
when major disaster strikes, the ability of the state to function, to coordinate, to communicate, to make decisions, to serve the people depends on having facilities that can withstand the impact and continue operating in its aftermath. Hurricane Melissa exposed the vulnerability of the government itself. Jamaica currently houses its ministries and departments and agencies in a patchwork of aging, scattered buildings, many of them structurally inadequate, poorly connected to each other, and wholly unprepared for the demands that a major disaster places on government operations. Madam Speaker, the government will advance the development of the government campus at National Hero Circle as a national priority. The vision brings together Jamaica's Houses of Parliament, key ministries and agencies into a single purpose-built campus. In the post-Melissa context, the government campus is more than a statement of national pride. It is a strategic investment in the continuity of government. Madam Speaker, this Parliament could never have withstood
Never.
Hurricane Melissa, or even a slightly lower hurricane. And I think it is now a moot point, Mr. Speaker. I think every member of Parliament here serving in this building would have to agree. The building has served us well, put it that way. But it really cannot carry us much further.
Right time. Right time.
Madam Speaker, resilience is not only our road and bridges. Resilience must also include our health facilities. Kingston Public Hospital has a historic and venerated